Hello and welcome to another episode of the Indie Alternative Podcast. It's me, Chris. This episode, Paul Williams and Matt Everitt join me to talk about the Demon reissue of the Montrose Avenue's debut album, 30 Days Out. Really good fun this episode. Paul and Matt talk about the recording and the writing of the album and stories from their time in Japan, getting signed. I mean, it's packed with anecdotes. Few technical gremlins here and there which I've edited best possible, so I hope you can forgive me for those. Also, listen out for the Diwali fireworks going on in the background. Before we hit the interview, just a quick reminder of all the ways that you can support the podcast. All the social media links are in the show notes, and if you want to buy me a virtual coffee to support financially, you could do that, and that link is in the show notes too. And lastly, if you haven't written a review or left a rating, if you could do that as well, that would be fantastic. Anyway, that's it for the waffle. Here's Paul and Matt. Welcome to the podcast, Paul Williams and Matt Everitt. How are you both?
Very well, thank you.
Nice to speak to you. Glad we can make this happen.
You're both hot off the Tim's listening party.
Yeah, furiously tweeting whilst trying to remember what we did 25 years ago. But yeah, it's great. It's a really great idea, I think. And, you know, I looked back at some of the other ones. I was really chuffed that we got to do it the day after Skid Row, which reminded me of the time when I ended up in a hot tub with Sebastian Bach in Japan.
No way.
It's not as sort of as it sounds. But I was sat in a hot tub in the hotel in Japan, just like outside next to the pool, and I saw this guy come over, this like tall guy with like really long hair. Thought he looked like a roadie, and he had like two Japanese girls, like one under each arm. Came over and sort of went, "Hey, buddy, do you mind if I get in with you?" And I was like, "Okay, go on." And I noticed the "You've Gone Wild" tattoo on his arm. I was like,
I think you're probably quite lucky you didn't pick up something really horrible from sharing a hot tub with him. I mean, man, I can't start with a story that good. That was brilliant.
Yeah, I think I've kind of used up my best story in the first 30 seconds.
It's been really nice to sort of do the reissue because everyone's been sort of chatting to each other on sort of email again, sort of reconnecting, which has been lovely. So yeah, the sort of listening party is that there's very small pockets of Montrose fans, but they do seem to care a lot. There's not a lot of them, but the ones that do kind of remember it really, really fondly. So that was really nice to hear people. A
lot of people going, "Why haven't you released the B-sides?" And all that. So okay, cool. B-sides and rarities. Well, we did kind of sort of and ah about doing that, didn't we? The like actually putting some tracks on the album, and it just wasn't able to happen for some reason.
Yeah, I think some of it was to do with the fact that with the vinyl, because obviously I think it was organised just ahead of like vinyl becoming enormously difficult to get hold of, and there being this huge kind of stockpile of people wanting to get their records pressed. So we snuck in a little bit. But as for the sort of quadrifold 8-disc version, that was never on the cards, unfortunately.
It's a shame though, because there's I think the version of the song "Yesterday's Return," the one that we all prefer, was by a guy called John Kelly, who I think produced for like the Beautiful South and stuff like that. And that version of the song was, in our opinion, sort of infinitely better than the one that ended up on the album. And then when we toured the album, we kept on playing the old version, kind of not realizing that like people would have heard the album and gone, "Why are you playing a completely different version?" It didn't even like occur to us to play that version. But so it would have been nice to put that on there. I've got it on my hard drive somewhere. I've kind of taken it off cassette and put it onto hard drive. So it would be nice to get that out there.
We could do that.
How much involvement did you get in the whole process and the artwork and everything else?
They did some stuff with me before for a different band, and they sort of proposed the idea. I was like, "Yeah, this will be great. I'm sure I'll speak to the other guys." And as like, but what I'm going to propose to them is everyone, because we hated the cover. We had the story behind this is the original cover. Before the cover that was released, we had a guy called Callie Callum, who's a phenomenal graphic designer and artist and illustrator, and like does covers or did covers for Scott Walker and like incredible people, and did stuff with the KLF and stuff. He's like a real visionary, like a really amazing guy. And we worked with him for ages on this cover. And Paul, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm completely wrong.
All right, yeah.
And he was great. And he saw us as a bit like the band. I was like, okay, and we were all like, yeah, great, the band. This is exactly what we're going to go for. And shot this series of photos in a really old, beautiful, ornate theatre. And we were like, this is great. This feels really textural and interesting. And he did some of the early sleeves, and we were like, of the singles. We were like, this sounds great. Brilliant. And then it came to sort of signing off on the cover, and we were in Japan when the artwork had to be signed off. We're like, well, we can't sign it off without seeing it. We've got to see the cover. They're like, well, and this was before the internet was a widely acceptable form of communication. And all someone sent us was like a crappy colour fax of what Callie had sent over. And we were like, this looks shit. Like, we can't. And they were like, you've got to decide. Is this a cover or not? Because we're running out of time. We're like, well, I mean, looking at this flimsy bit of A4 with this terrible colour fax, it's like, no, I don't think this is the cover. And so we didn't go with it. Did you ever see the actual final? I never saw it. I never saw Callie's actual vision ever.
I've got we took some like pictures in that theatre, which, if I'm not mistaken, was the theatre in like an old asylum or something, somewhere like outside of London, which I've tried to Google it, like, you know, theatre inside an asylum to figure out where it was, but it was really creepy, but it doesn't come up, weirdly enough. And the idea was that we were going to take the pictures, and then he was going to sort of superimpose us dressed up, like, if I'm not, like a little bit like kind of Civil War, American Civil War thing, is like, you know, like kind of that, I don't really describe it, but it's that kind of, you know, American Civil War outfit stuff, which it's just ludicrous. It's like beyond Spinal Tap. And I don't even know if we ever did that photo shoot. I think it was just, they sort of mocked up the thing without us in it. And because I do actually have a copy of that, the sort of the album promo, which is just the logo inside the theatre. And it looks a little bit kind of Narnia-ish, but not. And I think we got to the point where we hadn't done the photos, but we're just like, no, I think we should go somewhere else. So the rest of the sleeve is all Callie, but then the album cover is that god-awful picture that I have had to live with for 25 years of me chewing my fingernail because I was so bored at the end of a photo shoot. I was doing that, and they were like, "Oh, let's put it on the album," and then we all just went, "Eh."
So yes, this is all coming back. And so I said, well, one thing I know that I'd really like to do is, do we have to do the same cover? And Demon were like, no. We're like, okay, well, let's go back. And I'd had, when we went to the States we went to New York and went to the Montrose Avenue in New York, which was quite a pokey area at the time, as we were discussing the other day, Paul. And someone took a bunch of photos of us. The photos of us weren't particularly great, but one picture of this sign. I remember it floating around a little bit, and I was thinking, oh, that's really good. That looks strong. That looks brilliant. And then doing nothing about it. And then now it's like,
the album come out by that point, so it had already been released, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
We were in New York in October, and the album came out like beginning of October. So that's why we did it. So we kind of found the best album cover after it had already come out. And then there was talk of like reissuing it, and I don't know if you remember, we came with this other cover that was like some found image of this guy doing that Wheel of Death thing on a motorbike.
You're right.
And like, so that this out, and then the Japanese version of the album cover. So this album has now had 4 different album covers.
But it was really nice when I emailed everyone going, "Hi, do you want to do this?" And they were like, "Yeah, sure. Sounds really good fun. What do you think to this cover? Can we change it?" And everybody was like, yes.
I was listening to the album again. It zips along beautifully, doesn't it? I mean, it's like pretty much every track's a single. For me, it feels like you got everything there. It's broad. It's got, there's brass and strings. The harmonies are obviously what you guys were, well known for, and it was obviously something that was quite fresh at the time. I mean, how do you both feel? I know you both are obviously very proud of it, and so you should be, because it's a great listen. But what are your feelings on it with all that time passing, and obviously the luck involved in the whole process of the band success, and what you gauge as success?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like it's actually a weird one, because I always thought that the album wasn't what I thought we were capable of, if that makes sense. I think we were better live than we were on record. I remember listening to the mini disc of the album on the way on the flight to Japan, and just being like, oh man, this doesn't sound great. And I think what the Demon reissue has done is it's really kind of, the mastering they've done in it is brilliant. It really has kind of made it sound a bit beefier, for want of a better word. It sounds a bit more chunky. Like it doesn't. I thought it sounded a bit thin when I first heard it. I think we maybe didn't find the best way of recording it as well. We kind of went through all these different studios and producers, and for me, I think this still the best kind of method of. I've kind of gone into production myself now and realized that a lot of production isn't just the technical stuff and EQing and all that kind of stuff. It's actually finding the right environment for the band to work in. And for me, the songs that were the best recorded are the ones that we just did in the smaller studio with Ian and Nick, the guys who did the KLF stuff. We did the first EP in their studio, and because it was so small, we couldn't play live, which is always our thing, was like, we want to record everything live, in one take. But actually, when we layered things up and Matt and Jimmy did the bass and drums first, and then we all went and did our stuff, I think that's probably the closest to what I think we sounded like live. Matt, you may
No. I think you're right.
Big studios, it's sort of. I do like a lot of elements of the album, and listening back to it, there's certain things that I maybe wasn't that fond of at the time that have become more fond of. I haven't listened to it for a very long time, but I was really, really surprised at how good the remaster sounded. I think they've done an amazing job.
That's a good job. Yeah. For me, it was always, I was the drummer, and I remember getting the first kind of cassette demo of the band before I joined, just thinking these vocals are amazing. They're just brilliant. And that thing that it always used to really freak me out, that not only did it was almost like, oh, you can't have three singers, we've got three singers, you can't have three lead singers, no, we've got three lead singers. Any one of these people could be a lead singer, and they kind of all were. And that was for marketing, that was a bit difficult. Then who's the front man? It's like, there three singers. And then hearing how each of the voices really fit together. That's the thing that I love more about anything with the record, is how those voices complement each other in a really, really, really special way. And how easy it looked for you to do it. You wouldn't know this, Paul, because you were just in rehearsals doing it. The three of you would be like, okay, well, what if we did the chorus like this? And I'd be like, fucking hell, they've just done it. And I know that's because for years before I joined, you were learning how to do that. But yeah, it was quite a thing to witness. You listen to 30 Days or Helplessly Hoping, you're like, fucking hell, man. No fucker can sing like that. No, there's no one doing harmonies like that at all. That's the thing for me about the record, I think.
How did you hone that then, Paul, in the early days?
So it sort of started off as me and Scott were in the band in school in Wokingham, suburb of Reading, nice place. And we were really into even before we kind of got into more 60s music, like West Coast stuff like the Byrds, we were listening to bands like Alice in Chains that had really strong harmonies, a lot of the stuff we listened to, just had those harmonies. Rob kind of came along. We decided we needed a third person to sing the bits that were a bit too high for us to sing. And a lot of it was just, we did a lot of acoustic stuff. I always think, when you're trying to figure out harmonies, acoustic stuff is, kind of figuring out on an acoustic guitar and then bringing it into the studio. But there were a lot of moments that bit in Spinal Tap when they're at Elvis's grave and they're trying to figure out the harmonies of Hound Dog. There were a lot of moments like that where it's me.
Since my baby left me, dwell.
That's such a good scene.
There's a lot of that, but I don't know. I think I've personally always found it really easy to harmonize along to things. I can sit there singing along to Check Your Head by the Beastie Boys and harmonize something. A long time. I've always been able to do. And me and Scott were never wanted to be singers. We were singers by default, just because we couldn't find anyone else to do it. Which in Scott's regard, I think he's actually become in Montrose Avenue became a really great singer, and it's kind of weird to think that neither of us really wanted to do it.
Deciding where you were going to go in terms of the band and the local following and stuff, how quickly did you start to get a local following in did it all start in Wokingham and Berkshire, or were you just sort of already starting to tour, or did you already have Columbia or labels sort of interested?
So it's really weird. So we didn't we didn't really have that much of a sort of local following. We just kind of had this stupid self-belief that we were, when you're 17 and you're convinced that you are the best band in the world. And so we would like to spend all of our money going into the studio. So we were, like signing on like most bands are when they're 18. And you'd get your dole check and just go in and record like another hour's worth of overdubs or harmonies. And we just go in and do that. And that's how that sort of cassette demo was made. And then we decided to just put on our own gig at the Eversley Village Hall. So that was like one of our first gigs. And I don't know how, but someone from that label that was a subsidiary of Rough Trade, Blanco y Negro, I think, Dinosaur Juniors.
Yeah, that rings a bell.
They saw us and just like, oh, you guys are pretty good. And then we just kind of started getting, gigs in London, started playing like the Falcon and places like that. And there was just, I don't even know how it happened, but just a bit of a buzz happened. And that was when we still had the drummer before Matt, who looked like he looked a bit like Peter Tork in the Monkees.
He looked fucking cool. He looked fucking a lot cooler than me. I've got to say that, man.
He looked cool than all of us. Like he was just, he was kind of, cool, yeah. It's like to be a drummer in a professional band, you've got to, put your hours in. You've got to, get your chops up to speed. And he'd play a fill and come out a beat early or something, or a beat late, so we'd all have to kind of get used to playing these choruses where there'd be an extra beat on the end. And we kind of like figured it out. You'd be like, okay, so this bar we've just done a bit of like 17/8 or something in that one bar. But then we're like the label like, look, you guys are great, but you need to kind of get a better drummer.
And unfortunately, they couldn't. So. They
gave him a bit of like a sort of, look, you need to kind of quit your job and be able to rehearse every day. And he was like, no, I can't. So I can't remember who hooked us up with you. I'm guessing Fran.
It might have been
Sony. Yeah, we were already kind of getting, sort of having Sony talk to us. Yeah. And I think someone just kind of went, look, I know Matt's free now. You guys up for it? And I think they sort of sent you over to our little studio in Wokingham.
Yeah, and I had a phone conversation with, I think it was you and Scott. It could have been, you and Scott. And it was like, what are you listening to? And I said, the Beach Boys. And Scott was like, all right.
Yeah.
Come on. It was literally, had I said any other band, you probably would have said, no, fuck him.
Yeah.
I think that was probably it. And then, like just came along and just thought, yeah, it was just great.
Well, if I remember correctly, I think there was a little bit of like reticence because of your previous band that we won't mention.
It's like saying it's like a previous conviction because he was arrested for murder.
Yeah. I actually remember,
totally get
being on the phone to you, and I was like sat there, like kind of listening to the conversation, and then he hung up, and he was like, "Yeah, he sounds like a really nice guy, actually." And we were like, oh, "Okay, well, let's see how he is." And then we came in and you played the first song, and we we're like, "Okay, actually, this does sound really good."
Oh, so I worked hard on that audition, man.
But so it kind of it speaks, kind of it's credit to you the fact that we got you in despite not initially being up for the idea.
I don't blame you. Like to this day, people are like, I think, Menswear might have done quote unquote better, but Montrose was the band. Like that was the band that I'm most proud of more than absolutely more than any other band before or since. That was
we were talking when you were on the podcast before, Matt, you were talking about Menswear, the band that shall not be named. You said to me, you talked about Montrose Avenue and you just said how proud you were of the recording.
Yeah.
And the moment when the Bends, or was it OK Computer, one of the two came out and something struck you and it was a moment like, right, this is music. And I think, was it something was that around the same time as you were doing the Montrose Avenue and just thinking this is proper, there was ticking boxes for me?
There was that when you're in it like a band and obviously things kind of can go all over the shop in a band, but when you start, there's that lovely bit when you're all like, we're all sleeping on floors, we're all crashing in each other's shit flats, whatever. I used to remember we used to run around Tesco or an Asda in your flat, Paul. Like we knew the supermarket would be closing in half an hour, so we'd run around and get all the cheap food we could because we were all fucking skinned.
Yeah.
And you go back and like, we've got creamed sweet corn for dinner tonight. That's because that's the only thing that was cheap, and that really bonds you together. And then that happens musically. So I remember being like a little bit not off music, but like Menswear, like, for whatever fun it wasn't musically really great. And then like there's this bunch of guys going, Ben Folds 5, first album. I was like, I've heard of them. No, this record, listen to this record. And they're like, fucking hell, this is great. And like, then all of a sudden you're like, someone's chucking me Jason Faulkner. Listen to that, you're like, oh, okay. And all of a sudden there was this wave of music that that I didn't find it difficult to like. It was just, of course I love this. This is brilliant. And for me, it felt really wonderful to be immersed in something because it existed before me. And getting this wave was like, I knew Crosby, Stills and Nash. I wasn't that familiar with like all this amazing music that wasn't the obvious stuff. And all of a sudden it was kind of around all the time. And it was brilliant. I was really, really, really pleased to be part of it. Yeah. So
like me and the reason why me and Scott ended up in a band is because we just were completely obsessed with music. To the point, and like just when discovering all these really random bands like like the Left Bank and all that, those bands with, and then we kind of did music as a because of that. And there was we didn't like have social lives or kind of girlfriends or friends. I always feel like I didn't really have like a sort of teenage social life. I just stayed at home playing the guitar, and me and Scott talked about music a lot. It was that kind of thing, which made
watching the Kentucky Fried Movie.
Yeah, I remember like being around at your flat, and when we were completely skinned, like you said, because before it was all me and Scott would just live off these things called like pasta and sauce, which is like kind of like a sort of broccoli and cheese thing that you just.
I love that shit.
They were literally about 18p. And then Matt showed me how to make those like packet noodles actually nice. It was like, no, you got to take out all the water, then put the flavoring sauce in afterwards, like the powder in afterwards. I was like, oh my god, this is actually this is
because they were like 46p a packet. Big in the game,
pushing the boat out.
It was, and sort of when it happened, I did a long Twitter thing about it. Like there's that moment when it all kind of happens. And first, I remember we did. I think the first gig might have been a Battle of the Bands. Am I right? The first gig that I played. And it was like, let's obviously they're going to let's see if he can play. And I'm going like, fuck, I hope this is all right. There's like a local sort of Battle of the Bands, and bless all the other bands on that bill, bless them, but they didn't stand a fucking chance. I felt really bad for them. I was like, oh god, these guys are already going to sing, and I've played some gigs, so you're going to get. And we came second. They went. Do you remember? We didn't even fucking win it.
Well, no, I thought we did win it, but we sort of just said like we kind of graciously went, look, to be fair, like we're kind of about Sony. Can you just like give it to the next band?
What a nice guy! That's even worse, isn't it? It's even worse than hey, we're fucking great. You guys have it.
Is it like a School of Rock moment?
Yeah.
I loved all that.
It makes it sound like it's. Being big-headed, this was like it was a Farnborough Battle of the Bands. It wasn't like like sort of it wasn't London. It was small fry, low-hanging fruit. I think is what the term.
Even worse though. Oh dear.
So the cult following in Japan, it says cult following on the Wikipedia bio. So I'm assuming that's true.
Bio there's some drastically wrong things in it. Like just I can't remember what they are now, but there's a lot of misinformation. But
hang on a second. He's ripping up my notes.
I mean, the cult following thing, that's probably fair enough. But I can't remember what it is now, but there are definitely some things like, well, that's not right. But it reminded me, there's a story that someone told me where Mike Scott of the Waterboys went in to change some of his Wikipedia entries because they were wrong, and someone kept changing them back. Because they were like, well, where are your citations? My citations, I'm fucking Mike Scott. Do you know?
It's me.
I am the person who lived it. We're like, no. So because he didn't have these citations, they wouldn't let him change it. So I think I'm not going to get into an argument with someone who's updating our Wikipedia page. It's like life's too short for that. So,
yeah. But Japan was really, really good. It was really good. Like we did our biggest sort of outdoor show there, which was great. That was a really nice day. And yeah, they got it. They kept on. There was singles that came out in Japan that didn't come out in the UK, and they really liked it. It was definitely a place. It's a cliche though, isn't it? Oh, big in Japan, but there was,
The
it
Spinal
was,
Tap.
but it was not everyone's big in Japan.
The weird thing, it was like, I always call it was like a bit like going to like a rock star holiday camp. You know, you'd leave England where, you know, you'd just be like walking around budging and trying to find 46p noodles. And then the next day, you know, I remember we got to the plane and the person at passport control asked me to sign something. And I was like, what do you need? What do I need to like sign a form or something? And she went, no, like autograph. And I was like, oh, right. Okay. And then, you know, every morning you wake up in your hotel and there's like people throwing t-shirts at you and stuff. And the weirdest one was when we got to the liquid room in Shinjuku, and kind of turned to the tour manager and went, "Oh, we're just going to pop out and get some food." He's like, "No, you can't do that." And I was like, "Why not?" And then he went, "Look out the window," and you look out the window, and it's like Hard Day's Night. You know, there's like just 2,000 people in the street, and they had to get us out with a police escort. They just shut the road down. And actually, like, you know, and it's weird because we're like taking photos of all these people that are like, you know, taking photos of us because it's so weird. And then you go back to Britain and it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Life. So it was weird. It's really weird.
There was a sort of bigger thing. It's like the Montrose story wasn't supposed to stop with just that one album. There was the story hadn't finished. It wasn't supposed to finish there. There's a whole bunch of reasons why it did. But there was, you know, and going back to Japan and doing more of those places and capitalizing on that enthusiasm, and like taking all the things that Paul was saying about learning about production and doing songs differently, and like getting to grips with what we wanted to do. All those things were going to happen, but then like all sorts of like Wile E. Coyote, all these things just came and dropped on us like giant weights from cliffs, and, you know, false train tunnels. It just all coincided. Lots and lots of mistakes at the same time from lots of people involved, and that was the end of the story. And it shouldn't have been. There was more to do, and Japan just makes me think about how lovely everybody was that we worked with. They were a fantastic team, and they did really well, and we had some amazing gigs. And it was like, yeah, it should have been an opportunity to go back and do more of that. And that wasn't, which is a shame.
Did you carry on writing then, Paul? Were you already still sort of preparing for more recordings?
Yeah, so we pretty much demoed almost the whole album. Some of it, there's some really good stuff in there, actually. I mean, I've managed to salvage some of the tracks. You know, me and Scott were doing the demos on this digital Akai recorder, like a sort of 12-track recorder, just, you know, sticking like 2 mics on the drums and doing stuff that way in Sony's rehearsal room. But there's some, that's kind of how we always like to record anyway. You know, a lot of our first demos were done on like cassette 8 tracks, you know. I think I really like recording in that way. I think it makes you a bit more creative. So there's some really cool stuff that, you know, hasn't come out. It was definitely a bit second albumy. Like there was some, you know, jazz odysseys going on. I think there was some bangers in there as well. I think, yeah, it's a shame it didn't happen really.
Are you tempted to do anything with it?
What, with the songs or with the band doing the songs? Which one?
Well, both.
Can we get a bunch of kids that look just like we did when we were like 23 and like get them to record it?
Yeah. But the thing is, I was thinking, you know, you were slightly, would you say you were out of time and like a band out of time? Because in the early noughties or what, you had the Thrills and you had the Kooks, and it's not a million miles away from the sort of the harmonies and the transatlantic kind of sounds.
Yeah.
Do you have that feeling or not? Am I just barking up the wrong tree?
No, I completely agree. It was, you know, like you had before that, you know, guitar music was sort of, you know, like it's like the biggest thing. And then after that, you know, like you said, with the Thrills, who, you know, basically kind of wanted to be the Beach Boys, that was a little bit annoying. I don't, because I didn't dislike them, but it was just like, and, you know, around the time when we came out, the biggest bands really were, you know, it was like Fatboy Slim, Chemical Brothers, you know, that sort of stuff. And it was just like, it was kind of uncool to be in a guitar band really, and especially one that was obsessed with West Coast sort of harmony, psychedelia stuff, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I do recall going into Columbia Records very, very early on, and Scott, one of the singers, very imposing kind of character in many ways, used to wear this like cape this black, like sort of ornate the buckle, like it was a David Crosby thing, wasn't it?
David Crosby wore them, but it was basically like a sort of, those old Victorian kind of bobby.
Yeah, it was a policeman thing, wasn't it? And and these
like the Catch Jack the Ripper or something.
Yeah, that's exactly the right image. And like all of us had flares, and like I just remember sort of swooping through the offices of Columbia, these sort of figures in this, sort of mess of capes and cord and leather and tassels, and just sort of like swooping in. And apparently, like speaking to a couple of people I still know from that, they were like that. We were quite intimidated by like what you kind of came in. It was like, fucking hell, who's this? There's a band here.
Well, they're all wearing like Carhartts and like, stuff like that. And like, yeah.
Well, yeah, then it also, yeah, then it was just like, well, you weren't really like, not the minute things get signed, things go different. But like, yeah, sort of some of that self-belief and that like, yeah, we are, yeah, this dude's got a cape on. How you doing? That kind of went the way of like, oh, we should be thinking about midweek positions. It's like, fuck that shit.
Yeah.
That kind of happens, I guess.
That's exactly. I think I was talking to you about this, Matt, and the demos that we recorded, the ones I talked about were when me and Scott just used our doll checks to kind of record like 10 tracks over the space of a couple of years. There was some like really crazy kind of production stuff in there, because we weren't really thinking about that kind of stuff. And then, saying that like, Where Do I Stand, which was, the most successful single, it wasn't that kind of 3.5, upbeat pop song. It used to just kind of start really slowly and it would kind of build up to the chorus only really happened at the end. It was like really a bit more weird and experimental. And it did, the recordings weren't great enough to release because they weren't recorded that well, but we, I remember Matt at the same time, talking about the OK Computer moment. And I think, we were sort of listening to that on the tour bus quite a lot. And it was when Supergrass released, I think, was it In It for the Money?
Yeah.
And we kind of like had this sort of moment of, oh, okay, like this is really good. And we're not at that level.
Yeah.
And we need to kind of try and be that level. So we sort of, I think, went away from what the band had always wanted to be, which was something a bit more interesting, and kind of conformed a bit more, but partly because we were signed to a major as well. There was I remember literally people saying to us, you're signed to the same label as Will Smith. Will Smith is selling like 25 million records. What the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, there was quite a lot of that.
Would you sort of float the idea of doing any more music, Paul, or releasing some old recordings and putting something out again?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in all honesty, the chance of us doing any gigs is probably remote, just because of where everyone sort of ended up. I definitely, from looking at some of the responses to the comments on the Twitter thing, the listening party, seems to be, some people interested in hearing the demos, even if it's just sticking them up on Bandcamp for free or SoundCloud, not really, interested in, releasing it to make money. It's just, a question of if someone wants to hear it, then, even like Rob was messaging me afterwards going, oh, mate, get those demos off you, saying, yeah, he still like thinks about them. So yeah, I'd definitely be up for doing something like that.
Yeah, I think that'd be a really, really cool thing to do. And yeah, I think we'd if there was a situation where you could say, oh, 3:00 on Saturday, the whatever, bunch of equipment in there, would you all like to play music together? I think everybody would say yes. I think anything past that, I honestly don't know. But I think making a racket together, I'd just like to hear everybody sing again. I think that'd be pretty fucking cool, to be honest. And it's like it's a really good record. Like, I remember a friend came out. The record didn't do what Columbia wanted it to do. Columbia needs it to sell a certain amount to make it like a viable thing, a viable band for them to keep investing in, which I do understand. And my friend chatting just said, yeah, I played it to my mate, and they just said, yeah, but it's a really good record, isn't it? It's only, what was it? Did 34,000, which is fucking shitloads these days for a vinyl record, for an actual release. You just say, oh, this is a really good album. Why has it not been bigger? Well, because people haven't heard it. That's why it's not been a bigger record, because no one's heard it. I'm not saying it's the greatest thing of all time, but like everybody that does hear it just goes, all right, that's Montrose Avenue. That's really good, isn't it? It's like, yeah, maybe that's, the more I think about it, that's what I personally was excited about putting out there, because I haven't heard anyone that's, not they'd tell me, but listen to it and gone, yeah, is that what the fuss is about? It's like, yeah, oh, okay, right. That was a Montrose Avenue record. Yeah, I see it now. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I think it was, I almost feel like it's one of those albums a bit similar to, Velvet Underground and Big Star, where like musicians seem to like it.
Chris Martin was a big fan and stole our fucking road crew. I say stole, we stopped. They took them on. Basically, I'm saying on the record, no Montrose, no Coldplay. I'm just putting it out there. Now, Chris Martin wants to cover Where Do I Stand? Off you go, mate.
You've got a lot to answer for, Matt.
The Tim's listening party thing, you trying to get Harry Styles to keep on the road the other night.
Mate, I could do with a new kitchen. I'm just saying, like...
I could just do with the kitchen. That would be...
Guys, I've got to say, I'll let you go, but thank you so much for joining me. It's just been brilliant. I've not had to ask many questions. I've just had to sit back and let you guys chat. It's been brilliant to be part of that. So,
wind up and off we go.
Good luck with everything. I'll look forward to sort of anything that happens, and if you decide to put anything out, come back and I'll have you both back on to chat about it.
Oh, thanks, man.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Paul, I'll speak to you soon. We're booking Shepherd's Bush Empire, right? Like next Feb. Don't tell anyone.
I keep having dreams that we're doing like reunion gigs, but we haven't played the songs for like 20 years. And I'm going, should we not like rehearse a bit first? And everyone's like, nah, I'll be fine. And I'm just like, I'm sure, surely we need to just do a bit.
We need to play the songs again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take care, guys.
Thanks, Chris.